This program is produced by Nikhil Sablania. This program is based on the first chapter of Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar's book, Philosophy of Hinduism. What is the philosophy of Hinduism? This is a question that arises in its logical sequence, but apart from its logical sequence, its importance is such that it can never be left out of consideration. Without it, no one can understand the aims and ideals of Hinduism. It is clear that such a study requires some ground clearing and defining of the terms involved. At the outset, it may be asked, what is included in this proposed title? Is this title of Philosophy of Hinduism of the same nature as the title of Philosophy of Religion? I wish I could commit myself one way or the other on this issue. In fact, I cannot. I have read a lot on this subject, but I confess that I have not gotten a clear idea of what is meant by philosophy of religion. This is probably due to two facts. First, while religion is something definite, there is nothing definite about what is to be included in the term philosophy. Second, philosophy and religion, as can be seen from the story of the philosopher and the theologian, have been adversaries, if not actual opponents. As the story goes, the two were engaged in a dispute, and the theologian charged the philosopher with being like a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat that wasn't there. In reply, the philosopher charged the theologian with being like a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat which wasn't there, but declaring he had found it there. Perhaps it is the unfortunate choice of the title, Philosophy of Religion, that is responsible for creating confusion in the matter of the precise definition of its field. In Professor Pringle-Pattison, I find the nearest approach to a sensible statement of the precise subject matter of the philosophy of religion, who observes, "A few words at the outset, by way of indicating what we mean by the philosophy of religion, may be useful. Philosophy was long ago described by Plato as the synoptic view of things. That is to say, it is the attempt to see things together, to take into account all the main features of the world and understand them in their relations to one another as parts of one whole. Only thus can we acquire a sense of proportion and rightly estimate the significance of any special category of facts for our final conclusions as to the nature of the world, process, and the world ground. Accordingly, the philosophy of any special department of experience, the philosophy of religion, the philosophy of art, the philosophy of law, is to be taken as the analysis and interpretation of that experience in its bearing on our view of man and of the world in which he lives. And when the facts on which we concentrate are so universal and so striking in their nature, as are the facts revealed by the history of religion, the philosophy of man's religious experience cannot but have a decisive effect upon our general philosophical conclusions. In fact, with many writers, the special discussion merges in the more general. The facts with which the philosophy of religion has to deal are supplied by the history of religion in the widest sense of that term. As Thiele says, all the religions of the civilized and uncivilized world, dead and living, in all their expressions are a historical and psychological phenomenon. It must be noted that these facts form the data of the philosophy of religion. They do not themselves constitute a philosophy, or in Thiele's use of the word, a science of religion. If, he says, I have described in detail all the religions which have existed, their doctrines, myths, and customs, the observances they enjoin and the organization of their adherents, have traced the various religions from their origin to their flourishing period and decay, I have only collected the materials with which the science of religion works. The historical record, however complete, is not sufficient. Pure history is not philosophy. To attain to a philosophy of religion, we must be able to discover in the various manifestations a common principle whose roots we can point to in human nature, whose development we can trace by intelligible stages from lower to higher and more adequate forms, tracing also its close connection with the other main factors of human civilization. If this is philosophy of religion, then it seems to me that it is but a different name for that department of study which is called comparative religion, with the additional object of discovering a common principle in the various manifestations of religion. Whatever may be the scope and value of such a study, I am using the title Philosophy of Religion in a sense quite different from the sense and purpose assigned to it by Professor Pringle-Pattison. I'm using the word philosophy in its original sense, which was twofold. It meant teachings, as it did when people talked of the philosophy of Socrates or the philosophy of Plato. In another sense, it meant critical reasoning applied in passing judgment upon things and happenings. Proceeding on this basis, philosophy of religion to me is not merely a descriptive science. I regard it as being both descriptive and normative. So far as it relates to the teachings of a religion, philosophy of religion becomes a descriptive science. So far as it involves the use of critical reasoning for passing judgment upon those teachings, philosophy of religion becomes a normative science. This will make it clear what I shall be concerned with in this study of the philosophy of Hinduism. To put it plainly, I will put Hinduism on trial to assess its value as a way of life. Here is one bit of ground cleared, another bit remains to be cleared. It relates to ascertaining the relevant factors and the definitions of the terms I shall be using. I find that the study of the philosophy of religion involves the determination of 3 dimensions. I call them dimensions because they are like unknown quantities involved as factors in a product. These dimensions of the philosophy of religion must be ascertained and defined if its examination is to be made fruitful. Of the 3 dimensions, religion is the first. One must therefore define what he understands by religion, so as to prevent the argument from being directed at cross purposes. This is particularly necessary in the matter of religion because there is no agreed definition as to its precise connotation. This is not the place to enter into an elaborate consideration of this question. I shall therefore be content by stating the sense in which I am using the word in the discussion which follows. I am using the word religion in the sense of theology. For purposes of definition, this would perhaps be insufficient. For there are different kinds of theology, and I must state which one I mean. Historically speaking, from ancient times, 2 theologies have been spoken of: mythical theology and civil theology. The Greeks, who distinguished them, assigned a definite content to each. By mythical theology they meant the stories of gods and their doings told or enshrined in current imaginative literature. Civil theology, according to them, comprised the knowledge of the various festivals and fasts of the state calendar and the rituals appropriate to them. I am not using the word theology in either of these 2 senses. I mean by it natural theology, which is the doctrine of God and the divine as an integral part of the theory of nature. Conventionally understood, there are 3 propositions which natural theology propounds. 1, that God exists and is the creator of what we call nature or the universe. 2, that God governs all happenings which make up nature. And 3, God rules mankind according to his sovereign moral law. This program is produced by Nikhil Sablania. To buy Dr. Ambedkar's books, visit nspmart.com or call 85-275-3305, 1 or 885-1188170.